Hello everybody, and welcome to Ancient Architects. Please subscribe now to get the latest ancient history news and independent research from around the world. Recently I've been reading a blog called Old European Culture, and I do have to say, it is one of the most fascinating reads on the internet. I first came across it through Twitter, because regarding the ancient world, the author really does post some interesting ideas, interpretations and observations. I was specifically interested in their views on the imagery displayed on the T-shaped pillars at Göbekli Tepe, and that's because the author has a somewhat unique and intriguing hypothesis regarding the use of animal iconography in ancient art. There are hundreds of blog posts on the site discussing many different cultures and eras of history, and I've linked it below in the description, because it really is a wonderful rabbit hole of information, and so please forgive me if I don't give the work justice, because I'm trying to give a summary in video format for a broad audience. This video is really just an introduction. In a nutshell, the claim is that animal representations in the ancient world are in fact calendar markers. Animals are universal, their habits and behaviours are predictable and often seasonal, and so a depiction of an animal can, in effect, encode the time of the year. In the words of the owner of the blog, ancient animal symbols were used as calendar markers to mark the time when the depicted animal mates, gives birth, migrates, hibernates, and so on. It all depends on the context of the animal image and the scene or story it's part of. They say, and I quote, "They were most likely devised by the first farmers in the Fertile Crescent, maybe 15,000 years ago, although there are some indications that they could be even older, developed in Paleolithic Europe, and then brought to the Fertile Crescent during the Ice Age." These animal markers were in the Fertile Crescent, and they were used to create the first agricultural calendar. This basically means that the reoccurring annual events that were important to an agricultural lifestyle were commemorated by the animals that mated or gave birth, migrated or hibernated. For example, rains arrive at the same time the ibex goats are mating, snakes come out of the ground during the summer, and spiders and scorpions appear inside houses during the wet season, and so on. I'll say upfront now that in this video I'm not substantiating their claims, I'm not fact-checking their information or critiquing it, I'm merely presenting the concept and giving us a new idea to think about, because for me personally, it's making me look at everything in a completely different way. The claim is that these animal markers were the first real calendar, and it's from these symbols that so much arises as time goes by, including many gods from the ancient world, the elaborate mythological tales and the iconography, and even the constellations in the night sky. For example, the bull is a spring to summer symbol because we know at this time the Eurasian wild cattle were calving, i.e. the bulls are born in April and May. So maybe the ancient people then chose the bull for the group of stars the sun transits in April to May, which is also the end of spring and the beginning of summer. The animal calendar system migrated with the people, and it would be adapted to the various new climates and weather patterns that people encountered, as well as the habits of local animals in each location. To allow us to understand and interpret animal symbolism, there are basic fundamental rules to follow, and this helps us with pre-pottery Neolithic Turkey, which, as we know, has a very strong focus on animal symbolism, and they are often displayed in a very strange and specific way. The whole concept is logical and straightforward, it is easy to understand, and although I haven't done any of my own research, I have to say right now as a concept I love it. Apparently, although the area of southeastern Anatolia of course had a spring, summer, autumn and winter, the calendar was also divided into two main seasons. The dry season, which is roughly from May to October, and then the rainy wet season, which is roughly from October to May. The arrival of rain in this part of the world would have been the most important calendar event because, of course, water is life. And we know from my recent video on the cup holes of Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe how the pre-pottery Neolithic people dug many basins in the bedrock, and these were to collect rainwater. rainwater was critical for these hilltop sites to function. So, with the climate in mind, let's take a look at some of the animals important to Göbekli Tepe and the Tastapela sites. Animals found on the pillars, and also carved into statues. First of all, there is of course the vulture. Their mating season begins after the summer and into the wet period. They're like a marker for autumn. I showed this bone object in a recent video, which I speculated was a vulture, and this could be a phallic symbol. On pillar 43, we also have a possible pregnant vulture. Are they both symbols that show the rainy season is here? On the same pillar 43, which could well be a piece of art commemorating the end of summer and the start of the wet season, we also see a large scorpion. When it is cold and wet, scorpions disappear from the fields, but they start to appear in places where it's warm and dry, such as inside homes and settlements. So, seeing an abundance of scorpions in settlements tells us it's the beginning of the wet season. It now gets even more interesting. After my last video on the 3 so-called handbags on top of the pillar, which could well be enclosures, I mentioned the hypothesis by archaeologist Bahatan Selik that these V-shaped motifs might be fences. Dr. Laura Dietrich, who is one of the archaeologists at Göbekli Tepe, says they could actually be sheaves of cut sweet grass in the landscape inhabited by animals. So I did some quick research into sweetgrass, the type that is native to Europe and parts of Asia, and apparently it was grown from springtime through to the end of summer. Therefore, if the V-shapes are sheaves of sweet grass, it implies they have now been harvested, so it could also be evidence that Pillar 43 is commemorating the return of the wet period, aka the autumn, and also the end of summer. But why is there a crane on the same pillar? According to Cranes of the World, Eurasian Crane by Paul A. Johnsgaard, cranes gather in huge numbers in eastern Turkey in late September and early October, which is the end of the summer and also the beginning of the wet season. On the edge of Pillar 43 there is also a feline, and another one towards the bottom of the pillar. Although lions don't have a specific mating season, studies between 1968 and 1971 in the Gir Forest Sanctuary in India have shown that Asiatic lions are seen mating at the end of summer and into autumn, more so than any other time of the year. The Asiatic lion was once prevalent in eastern Turkey, Iran, Mesopotamia and so on. So, in summary, on Pillar 43 we see a scorpion, crane, vulture, felines and possible harvested grass, which on the face of it is a strange selection, but it looks like they can be tied together when we look at it with a seasonal mindset. This pillar shows an autumn scene. It's commemorating the wet period. Even the snake next to the crane can be explained, which I'll come to later with another example. Let's now take a look at the mural discovered at the pre-pottery Neolithic site of Sayburch. According to the Old European Culture blog, we have 2 very common animal calendar markers on display, the bull and the lion. Calving season for the Eurasian wild cattle is the start of summer, and Asiatic lions start mating at the end of summer and into autumn, the beginning of the wet season. In the mural, is this man actually hunting the bull? Is he holding a weapon to kill this symbol of summer? And is this man, maybe the same man, stood between the lions because the enclosure is commemorating the end of summer, when felines generally come together to mate? I know that this really is a lot of information to take in, but it's making me look at the animal symbolism of Göbekli Tepe in a totally different way. The pillars of Göbekli Tepe might well be telling us information about the seasons, commemorating key parts of the calendar, and it could imply that this ancient site was a place where people gathered to meet and maybe feast to usher in the seasonal changes, as well as being a place to exchange goods so people could get through the more difficult times of the year. Furthermore, it has been noted that one specific type of animal dominates the art in each specific enclosure, so maybe each enclosure had seasonal significance. More on this in a future video. As stated, I haven't substantiated the data on the Old European Culture blog, but I also have no reason to doubt the author's credibility or depth of research. They do have a very interesting working hypothesis, and with nearly 650 blog posts on the website, I can't pretend to even know a fraction of what they do. This video is really just an introduction to the concept, and to take this forward with regards to Göbekli Tepe, it does need a lot more work. The blog doesn't have a strong focus on Göbekli Tepe, and so the pillars of the enclosures do need a real detailed analysis. I myself took a brief look whilst writing this video, and the whole concept does seem to have a lot of merit. First of all, I needed to know what the snake represented, and according to the author, the snake is intrinsically linked to the sun. The snakes come out from underground when it's warm enough. They stay outside during late spring, summer and early autumn, and during that time they are visible to people. The snake is therefore a summer symbol, and according to the author of the blog, the snake actually symbolises the heat of the sun. In ancient Egypt, we can see the snake wrapped around the sun disk on the head of Ra-Horakhti, and they also flank depictions of Amun-Ra. They are not representations of the sun itself, but, as stated, the sun's heat. So, back to Göbekli Tepe, and taking Pillar 56 of Enclosure H as another example, and we have so many different animals on display. But again, you can apply the hypothesis quite well. As you can see, we have a vulture in the top middle and is trying to catch a large snake, which means the return of the rain and the waning sun. It's now the season of the vulture and the end of the snake. You have cranes and felines present, indicating the same time of the year, autumn. And actually the snakes are depicted in front of these animals, and it looks like they are being chased away, maybe implying that summer has now come to an end and the heat of the sun is leaving the land. On the edge of the pillar we have a bull's head, and this is flanked by two snakes pointing down. Is this also indicating the end of summer? This pillar from Enclosure D, the same enclosure as Pillar 43, shows large cranes chasing away snakes, and then on the edge of the pillar, the snakes are seen pointing down to the ground. Is this again showing us the end of the summer heat, when the cranes arrive in Anatolia from the north? And the fact they are chasing away snakes shows that the arrival of the birds coincides with the snakes moving underground, as the temperatures get cooler. And so, in summary, as you can see, this hypothesis is making me look at the art of Göbekli Tepe in a different way. And if you look at the T-shaped pillars and spot any observations, either in favour or opposing this idea, then please do comment below. These days I'm a skeptic of just about every new idea and interpretation I encounter, and towards the end of writing the script for this video, I remembered the pillars with three animals, where we have one above each other. Here on Pillar 2 of Enclosure A, we have a bull or aurochs at the top, then a fox and then a crane. I thought that this could well disprove the hypothesis, for Göbekli Tepe anyway. But I was assuming that every pillar was carved to commemorate one specific season, or one specific time of the year, which is actually an unfounded assumption, and a rule I had put into my head for no reason. Sometimes yes, maybe so like Pillar 43, but sometimes maybe not. At this stage, obviously I'm still evaluating the whole idea, so instead of setting my own rules, let's look at what the imagery is telling us based on the Old European Culture hypothesis. Maybe some animals have more than one meaning and maybe not. Maybe a depiction of one specific animal always had one seasonal meaning, like it was some sort of ancient language or code. So, with that in mind, and based on what we've seen so far, the bull or aurochs marks the end of spring and the start of summer. Foxes mark the end of winter, and, as we've seen, the crane is an autumn symbol. So actually, a bull and then a fox and then a crane, you could argue is actually in the right order, with autumn at the bottom and then winter spring and then spring summer. But what about pillar 38, where we see a fox at the top, and then a boar, and then a duck and 2 cranes, all of which are birds that migrate? Well, apparently, the boar marks the beginning of winter, with its mating season in November. So we have an end of winter symbol above an end of autumn symbol, which is above an autumn symbol in the beginning of the wet period. Again, the animals are in some kind of sequential order. Then we have another 3 animals, one above the other on pillar 20, and this is in enclosure D. Here we have a summer symbol sitting above the end of spring and start of summer symbol, above an animal that marks the end of winter and the start of spring. Again, the animals are in the correct order. Applying the calendar markers hypothesis to Göbekli Tepe is a work in its infancy, and I'm not going to say that this hypothesis is the absolute truth for Göbekli Tepe, because the level of work that is required has not been done. We still don't know exactly which animals are being displayed in stone. Is this a leopard or a lion? And is this a wolf, a fox or a jackal? The same discussion can be had for many animal depictions, and it does affect the overall hypothesis. I really don't want to simply cherry pick examples that conveniently fit, and I'm happy to disregard the entire interpretation if the idea does fail to hold water. At this stage, I think it does warrant another look at the iconography on the T-shaped pillars. And, whatever the outcome, I want to give a shout out to the Old European Culture blog and also their associated Twitter, both of which are linked below because they really have done a tremendous volume of work, and, if correct, they have solved a puzzle and opened the doors to a new understanding of ancient art. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Ancient Architects. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel, please like the video, and please leave a comment below. Thank you very much.